Well, I have a question before I begin. How many of you were like me when I was your age, and the word apologetics, when you hear it, you're suddenly thinking, who's apologizing for Christianity? Someone help me out with that. Just be real with you. I'm with you. I was there. I remember when I called my dad to tell him I was going to go and study Christian apologetics in graduate school. And the first thing he said on the phone was, honey, why are you saying you're sorry for Christianity? That is not what we taught you. He was not okay with it. I was almost in trouble. But I had to explain to him, no, Dad, that's not what I mean at all. See, apologetics comes from a Greek word. The word is apologia, and it just means to make a reasoned defense for something. So Christian apologetics is the art of giving reasons for the truth claims of Christianity. And we are going to do a little subset of that today called pro-life apologetics. So that means that my goals for you today are pretty modest. I am here to give you reasons why I think that the pro-life view is true in the way that counts. And I don't know any of your stories. You are all strangers to me today. I'm excited to meet some of you throughout the day. So I am going to ask for an abundance of grace as I walk through this. Because when we talk about an issue like abortion first thing in the morning, first thing in a conference, we all know that nothing that we're going to talk about is easy. Not a single thing. And what apologetics is very good at doing is taking these very difficult issues up into the abstract, where we can look at the reasons and the logic behind the ideas driving the issue. But what we can never ever forget is that issues, especially like this one, are always connected to real people. And when it comes to abortion, the one common denominator in the whole thing is that abortion hurts people. It causes an immense amount of pain. So as I begin to talk about it, I'm going to ask you guys for grace. But the other side of that coin is that when we begin talking about an issue like abortion first thing in an apologetics conference, we begin on the right foot here. Because what we're really talking about is something our culture is struggling to understand right now, and that is, what is it to be human? What does it mean to be human and valuable? Men and women, and by the way, you are all men and women. I'm going to address you as that. You're not boys and girls, and we need you. How are you going to share the gospel with a world that has forgotten what it means to be human? So we are going to begin with this today. And hopefully, even though it will be a difficult subject, we will have some fun along the way. So, I'm going to begin by talking about a story. Because when we're talking about issues like abortion, we're talking about what it means to be human. The issue of identity is central. And most great stories have identity as a central theme. And I could have pulled from any of the great stories that are out there. I do love stories. I love films. I love television. I love music. I love the arts in general. Lots of great stories to be told. But we are going to start with a children's book this morning because I'm a mom. And I have the microphone. How many of you are familiar with Max Lucado's little children's book, You Are Special? Show of hands. A few of you, awesome. Don't fret, I will tell you all about it. This book is about a people group called the Wemmicks. Now, the Wemmicks are little wooden puppet people, and they live in a village, and they have a very strange way of life. Every day, the Wemmicks watch one another. And some of the Wemmicks are very, very talented. So you have your resident athletes. They're the ones who can run super fast and jump high and do all the great fancy tricks and acrobatics. You have your resident Beyoncés. They can sing well. They can speak well. You have your Wemmicks who have beautiful, shiny new paint, so they're very pretty to look at. And when all of the Wemmicks watch those Wemmicks do what they do or look like they look, they award them with gold star stickers because every Wemmick has on their belt. I guess it's like a fanny pack. I don't know how else it's like a wooden box on their belt full of stickers. So the ones who do great things get gold stars. Some of the Wemmicks, however, are not very talented. And our main character is one of those. His name is Punchinello. Would you guys just say that name? We'll just get all that weirdness out of the way. I didn't come up with it. His name is Punchinello. Now, Punchinello tries to run fast and jump, but he's pretty clumsy, so he ends up falling down. And when he falls down, he inevitably scratches his paint, so he's pretty dinged up. And then when he tries to explain what just happened, well, he's not a very good speaker, so he trips over his words. And the other Wemmicks look at Punchinello, and they've decided at the outset of the story, wow, he's just not a very good Wemmick. I mean, look at him. And Punchinello begins to believe what they say of him. And so he deems himself unworthy. And when we find him in the beginning, he doesn't want to go outside and be around the other Wemmicks. He wants to stay in his Wemmick house and hide away. And we're going to leave him there for just a little while. There's more to the story, but I want to pull out a great big idea that is encapsulated in this little children's book that is key to what we're going to talk about today. Punchinello lives in a society where some of his kind don't matter as much as others. Men and women, you live in a society where some human beings don't matter as much as others. That is a great big idea. Now, here's the thing about ideas. As the great philosopher Leonardo DiCaprio, thank you for laughing at that. Actually, I've never had a conversation with Leo. He might be a great philosopher. I know he's a good actor. But as his character said in the film Inception, this might be the only part of the movie I really understood, an idea can be the most dangerous thing. He got that right. An idea can be the most dangerous thing because ideas have real-world consequences. As my friend John Stonestreet, who's the director of the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, says, ideas have consequences. Dangerous ideas have victims. That's worth repeating, so I'll say it one more time. Ideas have consequences. Dangerous ideas have victims. Some human beings don't matter as much as others is a very dangerous idea, and it has left a trail of victims in its wake. It's not a new idea. It's one that we could do a simple glance at history and see how many times that idea has sprung up over the years. We can go as far back as Israel under Pharaoh. That was slavery. Some human beings don't matter as much as others and can be used as commodities, right? We can fast forward to ancient Rome, where this idea was manifested in any number of ways. Abortion was practiced in ancient Rome, as was infanticide. So the babies that were born that they didn't want, they left them exposed to the elements to die. It was the Christians in ancient Rome who knew where those locations were, usually outside the city in the graveyards, and they would go find those babies and take them home and adopt them. Fathers were allowed to kill their adult children under Roman law. And let's not even begin to talk about what went on in the Colosseum with the gladiators and others who were killed for the purpose of entertainment, while millions or hundreds at a time watched and cheered and begged for more. We can fast forward to the blight in our nation's history, slavery once again, still going on in the form of human trafficking. We can talk about the Holocaust, when a small group of people decided that an entire other people group should be deemed subhuman, and millions died. And if I'm right about the issue of abortion, and I have to build a case today, if I'm right about it, the death toll of this particular idea runs at the rate of around 2,500 to 3,000 deaths every single business day. That's just a number in America. That's not a worldwide count. That's easily 2 times Shawnee High School every day. We have to pay attention to this idea. Now, it shouldn't be surprising that this is where our battleground is. Paul knew that ideas were important, that Christianity is a thinking faith, that we can love God with our hearts, with our whole being, and with our minds, too. In 2 Corinthians chapter 10, when he was defending his own ministry, remember what he said. He said, Christian, your weapons are not of the flesh, but they are divinely powerful for the tearing down of strongholds. And I think what Paul is talking about there are these sets of ideas, or the ways that people view the world around them. If you don't believe me, listen to what he says. He goes on and says, we are to tear down arguments, ideas, and every lofty opinion raised up against the knowledge of God, ideas, and we are to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ, ideas. And how do we go about fighting this battle? Back to 1 Peter 3:15, where it says, always be ready to give reasons, apologia, for the hope that is within you, but we do it with gentleness and respect. So let's learn how to do that today. The fact of the matter is that our culture is struggling to answer two very important questions. I already told you about one of them, and we are going to deal with that one. What does it mean to be human and valuable? People are answering that question these days, and we're seeing the ideas that come from their answers play themselves out in front of us. But the first key question our culture is struggling to answer, and I would say the biggest hurdle when it comes to defending the pro-life view in our culture, is the question of truth. Is truth really true? How many of you think that sounds like a word game? But it's not. See, abortion is a moral issue, so I'll ask it this way. Is moral truth, what is right and what is wrong, is that something real that we can know, or is it something that we get to decide for ourselves? People are struggling to answer that question right now, so we must start with that question. And the fact of the matter is that when it comes to the issue of abortion, people confuse the claim abortion is wrong with preference claims. They're confusing moral claims about what's right and wrong with preference claims. Let's kind of give you an illustration about how this might work. I live in Colorado. I have not always lived there. I'm from Georgia, which is why my accent doesn't match my place either, Tawa. I'm with you. I understand. Okay. But I'm from Georgia. I live in Colorado now, in Manitou Springs, Colorado. Very hippie little town. It's kind of fun. My house overlooks the main avenue in Manitou Springs, and across the street on that main avenue, a direct line of vision from my desk, this is like God's cruel trick on me right now, he's testing me, he's sanctifying me, is a place called Colorado Custard Company. Let me tell you about Colorado Custard Company. It's run by a man named Matt. Matt has won the Pikes Peak Marathon 13 times. The man who's won the Pikes Peak Marathon 13 times runs the ice cream shop, you guys. Like, he's found his purpose in life. I think it's his cruel trick. Like, this is how he's going to win. Now, he's great. But one of the desserts that he serves at Colorado Custard Company is called the Mountaineer. Let me describe it for you. The Mountaineer is a vanilla custard base. Now, custard, as I understand it as a Christian apologist, is basically a health food. Because it has more egg content in it, so lots of protein, right? And it has less oxygen than ice cream, so it's not as airy, it's super creamy. So Matt builds this vanilla custard base in the cup where he builds my Mountaineer, and then he goes and scoops fresh raspberries into that vanilla custard and whirs it up like Dairy Queen Blizzard style. Are you with me so far? Yeah. It's never too early in the day to talk about ice cream. Then he walks over to the hot fudge pump, and he pumps molten hot fudge into the middle of this delectable dessert. That is the Mountaineer. I have a claim to make about it. The Mountaineer is easily the best dessert on the face of the planet. Show of hands if you agree with me and you think that is a true statement. 2 hands. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. Just out of curiosity, are any of you offended that I think that's true? Guys, I'm from the South. I get it. Okay, that's fine. We can fight about ice cream, college football, whatever. Yeah, not so many, though. What if I were to make another claim? What if I were to say the Mountaineer is the cure for juvenile diabetes? Any takers on that one? Good job. Okay. Notice I did not raise my hand either. Those are 2 very different kinds of claims. See, the first claim was a preference claim. The claim was about me. It told you more about me than it did about the ice cream. The fancy word for that is that it's a subjective type of claim. It's about the subject, just like the subject of a sentence is what the sentence is about. When you make subjective claims, you're talking about your preferences. You create those. And because you create them, there's no one's subjective claim that's any more valid than anyone else's, because my favorite flavor has no more authority than your favorite flavor. Are you with me so far? The second claim was not about me. Now, you could infer from that claim that I might need to go back and study the workings of the pancreas a little bit more, right? You'd be like, why did they invite her? She is not with it. But the claim wasn't about me. It was about the ice cream or the custard and its relationship to the disease. It was about, we'll call them the objects in question. This was an objective kind of claim. Objective truths are truths that exist independently of you, the subject. That means they're true whether you like them or not. They're true whether you're even aware of them or not. See, they're the kinds of truths that you discover. You don't create them. And by their very nature, objective claims can be right or wrong. Like the one I made was completely wrong and dangerous. They can be true or false. And you can usually have a discussion or bring some evidence to the table as to why they are true or false, right or wrong. When it comes to a claim like abortion is wrong, and let me define abortion for you quickly. When I say abortion, what I mean is intentionally killing the human fetus. Intentionally killing the human fetus. That's a definition that none of my friends have a problem with. My pro-choice friends are fine with that definition, as are my pro-life friends, but they'd rather say baby. When I make the claim abortion is wrong because it intentionally kills innocent human beings, people in our culture think that I am talking about my preferences. But men and women, when you make a moral claim, or a religious claim, or a values claim, you're not talking about your preferences. The claim isn't about you at all. It's about the nature of reality. Your claim is about what the world is really like or not like. So it's actually an objective kind of claim, not a subjective kind of claim. But people get this confused when it comes to abortion, especially when it comes to abortion. How many of you have ever heard the slogan by chance, "Oh, you don't like abortion, then don't have one"? Anybody ever heard that one? A couple of you? Yeah. There's a word in there that I have an issue with. Can you guess which word? I heard it. The word like. Because it takes an objective claim and tries to twist it into a preference or a subjective claim, and it's not that kind of claim. There are so many examples that I could give. I can reach as far back as 2012, another election year, to the vice presidential debate that took place that year. You guys can actually go watch this happen on YouTube. It's the last 7 minutes of that debate between Joe Biden and Paul Ryan, who were both up for vice president that year. I want to talk about the way the moderator framed the question when it came to abortion. She said, first, because she had two Catholic gentlemen sitting in front of her, that was historic. So she pointed out the historicity of this moment. But then she said, "Gentlemen, I want to know how your religion has influenced your own personal view on the issue of abortion. And gentlemen, remember this is an emotional topic and you must speak personally." That's our national stage. Pay attention. Our country is dying to talk about abortion as if it is a preference issue, and it's not. I remember being on a college campus a few years ago. I met a young woman named Amanda, and Amanda had come out to the display that the pro-life group was having on campus. They were hosting an event in the public part of the campus with full permission of the university, a secular university, and they were hoping to create an honest dialogue over the abortion issue. The event was actually a big success that day. But this young woman came to this center of campus where this was taking place, and she was clearly very agitated. She had a sign that said "pro-choice and proud of it," that she'd clearly made kind of in a hurry. And she was saying things to people as they walked past. And so when I approached this young woman and asked her name, she told me. I asked if we could talk. She said, "Sure." And so the first thing I asked her is, "Okay, well, tell me about your poster. What brought you out to the event today?" She said, "Here's the deal. I would never have an abortion, but what you people are doing on our campus, see, you have no right to tell anybody else what ought to go on in the privacy of their bedroom at home. I think you need to leave." I said, "Amanda, thank you for your honesty." She was being honest. "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" She said, "No, I don't mind." I said, "What do you personally oppose about abortion?" Remember, she said she would never have one. Guys, she didn't hesitate. She said, "It kills a baby." I said, "Amanda, I really want to understand what your view is. Let me tell you what I understand so far, and you tell me if I've got it right." You think that abortion kills a baby, which is why you would never have one. Those are her words, not mine. But you think it ought to be okay for other people to kill babies. And she stopped and she looked at me and she was very quiet for a minute and she said, "It doesn't sound so good when you say it like that." She had bought that this was a preference kind of issue, and I was just trying to point out to her that it's not that kind of issue so that we could have a real conversation about it, and we did. I don't know if I changed her mind. I know that we gave each other some things to think about, which is how reasonable dialogue ought to go. Go back to that slogan one more minute before we move on to making a case. Don't like abortion, don't have one. What if, as Francis Beck would suggest, that slogan said, "Oh, you don't like slavery? Don't own one." "Oh, you don't like spousal abuse? Don't beat your spouse." Those are moral issues too, but we're a lot clearer on those, not all the way, but a lot clearer on those than we are about abortion. So with that much confusion, how do we make a case? How do we gain any clarity? The rest of the time I have with you, we're going to do 3 things. And by the way, if you were like me and note-taking is your spiritual gift, and I am frustrating you right now, we can talk about that later. I can give you our website. Life Training Institute's website is simply prolifetraining.com, no dashes, prolifetraining.com. There are a ton of free resources there. You can watch presentations like this one. That doesn't mean you need to tune out, but it means that you can slow down and only write down the most important things. You're not going to miss everything. You can go find it, okay? We need to learn how to simplify the issue when it comes to talking about abortion. Please don't hear me saying that abortion is a simple issue. I know better. I know that there are so many complex things that bump into the issue of abortion. I work in this field, and I talk to women all the time on all parts of the spectrum when it comes to pro-choice to pro-life. I know that it is complex emotionally and psychologically and politically and economically and all the other colleagues we could point out. But morally, it is very simple. See, the whole issue hinges on just one question. So if you can learn to bring the conversation you're having back to that question, then you can have a meaningful conversation. Then we're going to learn how to answer the question in a way that may surprise some people. And finally, we're going to make a case for why you matter. So I hope that today ends up being actually encouraging before you set out on the rest of the day. So, simplifying this issue, let me tell you another story. When I was living in Georgia, we lived in a log cabin in the woods. Not the kind from the horror movie. It's the cool kind. It was very lovely. And I have a best friend named Courtney. Courtney has 3 boys. Her oldest boy's name is Micah, and Micah is my daughter's very good friend. I have 2, remember, Neely, my girl, and Rogan, my boy. One day, Courtney came over to visit with me. And it was a beautiful day, a lot like this one, and so we sent the kids out into the backyard where we could not see them, but we could hear everything that was going on. We left the door propped open. And Courtney and I sat down to have, objectively speaking, the best beverage in the world, which is coffee. Some of you are like, yep, amen to that right now. And we started sharing and talking and visiting. We were 2 sips in when I heard the sound that every parent dreads, blood-curdling screaming coming from the backyard. It was distinctly female, which means that's my kid. I did what any good parent would do, future parents, you will understand one day. I dropped my coffee, which, spoiler alert, that is the most tragic part of the story. And I'm running for the back door, and as I'm running for the back door, I'm hearing her continue to scream, and I hear her shout, get it off, just kill it! Now, in that small stretch of eternity, parents nod if you understand what I'm talking about, yes, I'm asking myself, kill what? What is on you, child? Is it a wasp with a stinger? I'll help you kill that. You judge me if you want to. I don't do bugs. It would be knee-jerk, fight or flight. I'm fighting in that circumstance. Is it the next-door neighbor's dog? Our next-door neighbor had a Jack Russell Terrier named Ace. Now, that dog is really cute. That's it. He was vicious. He would bite, like your ankles and stuff. If it's Ace, we're not going to kill him. We're going to put him back over Steve's fence and ask Steve, why is your dog in my yard biting my kid? Is it her brother? My son is basically an almost 8-year-old Wolverine, you guys. I'm not kidding. He's pretty talented. So it's not completely out of the question, but at the time I was a pastor's wife, I don't really know where we would go for help. I digress. The answer to what is it matters, doesn't it? It matters. For you type A's out there, it was a lizard. Micah caught a little green lizard. Neely wanted to hold it. She got it in her hand. It slithered loose and went up her shirt sleeve. Yeah, everyone in the audience just did a this, I know. She flung the lizard several feet across the backyard somehow or other, and it slithered away to safety, so no animals were hurt in the making of this example, and I'm happy about that. But the answer to what is it matters. We're here to discuss the question, can we kill the unborn? I'm going to go out on a limb and say, sure, if the unborn are not human beings. If it is true, as many of my friends want to tell me, that abortion is no different than clipping a fingernail or pulling a tooth, it's a simple medical procedure, then I should retire. But if the unborn are human, that's different. The question at the center of the debate is, what is the unborn? What is the unborn? We have to answer that question before we can talk about whether or not we can kill the unborn. But most people skip that question. They skip it altogether. And they'll give you reasons for why abortion ought to be allowed. I'll deal with a few of them today, but there are so many. And my warning before I even list them is that none of these reasons deal with easy things. Every single thing on this list deals with something important. Let's not miss that. Some will say abortion is an issue of privacy, a private matter between a woman and her doctor or between a woman and her God. You have no say as to what goes on in the privacy of someone else's bedroom, as Amanda on campus told me. That is the legal justification under the federal law as it stands right now. It's an appeal to privacy. Some will say abortion is an issue of poverty. This woman can't afford to feed another child. Who do you think you are to tell her she ought to go through with the pregnancy? Some will say that abortion affords women the ability to continue with their education, to pursue their career, to pursue their dreams without an unplanned pregnancy standing in their way. Some will say that abortion prevents unwanted children from being born. I think of Ebenezer Scrooge, the need to reduce the surplus population. Who wants to have a baby that nobody wants? Some will say abortion prevents disabled children from being born. After all, they might suffer, and we don't want them to suffer and have a poor quality of life. Some will say if you make abortion illegal, wouldn't women be harmed because they might pursue illegal abortions, back alley abortions, and be hurt in trying to do that? Some will say if you make laws against abortion, wouldn't that be imposing religion on other people? We can't do that, can we? And the list keeps going and going and going. But let me tell you something. Every single one of those justifications or reasons for why abortion ought to be allowed skips that question and assumes something about the unborn. Every single one of those justifications assumes that the unborn is not human like you and me. I know this is true because if I were to walk my nephew up on stage, he's not here, but I wish he was. You guys would immediately agree on a couple of things about AJ. The first thing you would agree upon is that he is crazy. He's 2, so that makes sense. The next thing you would agree upon is that he might be one of the cutest babies you have ever seen. My blonde-haired, blue-eyed brother married a woman who looks like a Mayan princess. They made a beautiful baby. The third thing that you would agree upon is that AJ is, without question, a human being. Yes? Yeah, 3-year-old boys, or almost 3-year-old boys, they're human. Okay, we're good so far. You guys please interact with me. Otherwise, I will begin to babble nervously and this will get real awkward real fast. AJ's about this tall. What if I were to stand AJ next to me And then he is kind of doing his thing or whatever. But I read that list of justifications back to you. And then I told you that those are reasons why I think I ought to be allowed to kill him. You would think I'd lost my mind. See, that's the thing. We don't kill 2-year-old human beings in the name of privacy. And we don't kill 2-year-old human beings in the name of poverty or when they're expensive. Good news for you, we don't do that with teenagers either. You guys are expensive. I have one. We don't kill 2-year-old human beings when they stand in the way of something we want, not even our dreams. We don't kill 2-year-old human beings when they're unwanted. There are orphanages around the world full of seemingly unwanted children. That's arguable. We don't kill 2-year-olds when they're disabled. We have no problem with laws that make it harder to kill 2-year-olds, even if someone might be harmed in the process. And it is no more religious to say that AJ has value and cannot be killed than to say that he doesn't. Careful thinkers make distinctions where they need to be made. Our question is the unborn human like AJ is human? If so, then we cannot kill the unborn for those reasons either. Now, I have not made a case for the pro-life view at this point, but I've done something very important. I have framed the conversation. You can do that too. The next time someone tells you a reason for why abortion ought to be allowed, ask yourself, would this be okay if we were talking about a toddler? If the answer is no, then you know that they are begging that question, what is the unborn? And you can use a toddler as an example to bring them back to the question. You can hold your hand out to give them something concrete to look at and to consider. Let's take an objection that I hear often, that abortion is an issue of poverty. This woman can't afford to feed another child. Who do you think you are to tell her that she has to go through with the pregnancy? Don't get mad. Just hold your hand out about waist high and say, you know what, let's just say for the sake of conversation that I have a 2-year-old standing next to me. And last week, her dad lost his job. They've hit really hard times. The family can't afford to feed all of their children. They can't even afford to feed themselves, the parents. So they've reached a consensus. They're going to kill their toddler to lessen that financial burden. Do you think they should have that right? Now, that sounds very elementary, and I promise you they will look at you like you're crazy. And they'll say, no, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, or something like that. But ask them, why not? They will say something like, the 2-year-old is human. The 2-year-old is already a person. Or, that's completely different. No matter what they say, you are back to your question. Is it different? See, I want to know, is the unborn human like the 2-year-old is human? Let's talk about that. Then we can talk about poverty, or perhaps even how to help the individual you might be referring to. Trot out your toddler when someone gives you a justification. Now, we're going to answer the question, what is the unborn? We can't leave people hanging. So here's my second point. But I want you to understand something about this question. It is not a religious question. We don't go to the Bible for the answer, what is the unborn? You can glean many, many wonderful truths from the scriptures about what it means to be human. But this is a scientific question. And I agree with Abraham Kuyper's quote, that Christ is sovereign over every inch of reality, which means he's sovereign over every subject that you study in school. God, after all, is the person of truth, as Christ claims to be. I am the truth. So I love science. And science gives us an answer to this question. There is a whole branch of science called embryology, simply means the study of embryos, which is a human being at the first 8 weeks of development in the womb. And that branch of science tells us without question the answer. What is the unborn? From the very beginning, the moment of conception, the unborn is a living, distinct, whole human being. We know that it's alive. It fits the definition of an organism that you learned in 7th grade life science. It undergoes cellular reproduction, meaning it grows. Dead things don't grow. It turns food into energy. It responds to stimulus. When you mess with it, it responds. And they've even been shown to be great at wound repair, embryos have, which is pretty impressive. We know that they're alive. The embryo is also distinct. That means it's a separate entity from its mother. It is not part of the woman's body, not like my arm is a part of my body. It is attached to the mother, but it's not part of her. See, that embryo has its own unique genetic code that differs from its mother's and from its father's. How many of you like science? I'm just curious. My science people. You guys are going to love my friend Melissa later. She is like the guru of science. But let me get scientific for just a second with you because this is amazing, mind-blowingly so. So Dr. Maureen Kondik is a neurobiologist at the University of Utah. She is a brilliant woman. And she's often asked as a scientist, how do you know when one type of cell becomes another type of cell? How do you know when that happens as a scientist? And she says, well, that's very simple. Across the board in biology, for one cell to become another type of cell, one of two things has to happen. Either the cell changes in the stuff that it's made up of, or its material composition. If that changes, you have a new cell. Or if it changes the way that it behaves, you have a new cell. But only one of those things has to happen. She's then asked the question, Dr. Kondik, how do you know when human life begins? She said, well, that's very simple and observable. As soon as sperm and egg meet, within 250 milliseconds, the plasma membranes of those cells begin to merge, forming a hybrid cell surface, which means that that human egg cell changes in its material composition, the stuff that it's made up of, and becomes a new kind of cell. It goes from being an egg cell that could have survived about 24 hours in its environment to being a new kind of cell that now can survive 100 years or more, given medical technology, because it becomes a human being. That's incredible. And within 3 to 5 minutes after that first box is checked, the only necessary box, by the way, for it to be a new type of cell, but 3 minutes later it forms the zona pellucida, and instead of being an egg cell that's job was to attract sperm, it becomes like the Death Star. Thank you for laughing at my Star Wars reference, 5 of you. And it begins to repel them. It changes behavior as well. It is a distinct entity. The unborn is also whole. That sounds crazy. You guys do me a favor and lift up one hand. Just making sure you're still awake. All right, we're good. Turn it around. Take the other hand and gently scratch the back of that hand. Do not hurt yourself. Brush it off. That was awkward. Okay. Thank you for being such a trusting audience. I mean, for real, I mean that. I have a purpose. We just successfully scratched several hundred of our own skin cells off of the backs of our hands. Now those cells, many of them were dead because they're on your outer layer, your epidermis, but some of them are still alive on your lap right now. They will die, I feel like 100 of you like, oh my goodness, that's so gross. They will die in just a minute. No one here is guilty of mass murder. Congratulations. Those cells are a part of you. And their job is to contribute to the overall functioning of the organism that is you. That's their job. The embryo is different in kind from any other cell. It's even different from a sperm and an egg. Both of those cells are alive. But they too are part of another organism with a specific job. However, that embryo, even at the single-celled zygote stage, its parts contribute to its overall function, and it goes on to do something that is remarkable. See, we tend to think of embryos as things that are constructed, which makes sense because we live in a society where we build a lot of stuff. We're very industrial, right? My husband drives race cars. Some of you will learn that about him today because he's doing a couple of the breakout sessions. He and his brother, they do rallycross races here in the U.S. Their car, their Subaru WRX, it's all souped up. I don't speak car very well, so I can't tell you all the things. All the things. It just goes fast. But their car was put together on an assembly line somewhere. It's a constructed thing. It was put together piece by piece by piece and came into being over a period of time. Our culture thinks of you like that embryos somehow are just a clump of cells or just a mass of tissue, as if you could add some more parts and then the end product is a baby. We've gone from using terms like procreation, which is what my grandmother would have said. And now everybody says reproduction, like it's some kind of factory. Dangerous ideas have victims. But men and women, you did something that no constructed thing could ever do. From the time you were an embryo, you drove your own development from within. And you're still developing. That's different. Philosopher Richard Stith gives us this most wonderful illustration that you are free to use. He talks about an artifact called a camera. Nobody's going to laugh at that. A Polaroid camera. How many of you know what that is? I'm just curious to see. They're kind of coming back, right? How many of you have one of the new ones? Polaroid cameras that spits the tab out. You know what I'm talking about? Not if you're with me. Polaroid camera spits the tab out. Awesome. So he says, imagine you are in the Amazon jungle and you have one of those. And you're taking pictures of the scenery around you. And you go to snap a photo of what's in front of you. And as you hit that button, a black jaguar leaps out across the path. And you've got it. Now, I happen to be an expert on black jaguars because I watch Wild Kratts. That's right, we can be friends. Okay. They are very, very rare, I do know that. And because they are rare, there are not many photos of them in the wild. So what you are holding is something of value, like National Geographic would pay big for that. Imagine you're looking at it, you're about 10 seconds into the process, and someone comes and looks over your shoulder, and they kind of make a dismissive noise. They take that tab out of your hands, rip it in two, and toss it aside. You would be upset with them. But imagine they looked at you and they said, what's the big deal? It was just a brown smudge. You'd say, no, it wasn't. I was holding a photograph of a jaguar. It was rare and beautiful and valuable. It was already there. You just couldn't see it yet because it was doing what? Developing. Just like you did and are still doing. You didn't come from an embryo, you once were one. That's what science has to tell us. Now, I have one more point to make in this presentation, because there are some who will concede your science and say, oh yeah, we know all that, but, and they make another kind of crazy claim. But before I go any further with that, I want to say one thing that's probably the most important thing I'll say today. I'm often asked, what's the hardest part of what you do, Megan? When you give this presentation to high schools and colleges around the country, what's the hardest part of the presentation for you to get through? It's that. It's that science. Because the kind of war that we're in, where the enemy makes his camp in the realm of ideas that we can't see, when it comes to abortion, the ideas out there are so convoluted that chances are when I lay out that scientific case, I am letting someone in the audience know that that choice they made last week or last month, or that their sister or their friend made or their mother made, or the grandmother, what really happened that day. Because they learned for the very first time what the embryo truly is, and that they were told something wrong. And it rips the world out from under some people. The only thing that keeps me talking, because it's incredibly hard to know that you might be doing that, is that the truth truly is what sets us free. And it's because I think that Christianity is objectively true, the kind of truth that matters. And there are wonderful reasons that you are going to explore at this conference today as to why that is. It's the only reason you should believe in anything. But what it tells me is that its gospel is also objectively true. And that when we stood without hope, helpless to help ourselves, spiritually dead, that God could have left us there, and had he done that, he would still be good. That's a great, big, hard truth. But the fact of the matter is he didn't leave us there. He sent a rescuer. The Son, the second person of the Trinity, came into this world. Guys, you are privileged to be in situations where you hear the gospel day in and day out. Perhaps you go to a Christian school. You definitely part of a youth group, something like that. But be careful that you don't become inoculated to it. Be careful that you don't get just enough so that you're immune to the real thing. Because this is the deep end, you guys, that Jesus loves you, and this you know because the Bible tells you so. He came into this world as a zygote. The infinite humbled himself to a single cell in Mary's womb, and he lived a life that we couldn't and attained a righteousness that we couldn't, and then he laid down his life. Nobody took it from him, and he did it on our behalf to receive what was due us. And then he got up from the dead 3 days later. Love apologetics, guys. The reasons for that resurrection being the best explanation of what happened that day in history are far better than any other explanation that's ever been given. Easter is coming. It's been, but this Easter is coming. Hallelujah, indeed. And when Christ got up from the grave, he made a mockery of death and sin, the real enemies. And when he did that, he made a way for all of us. If you have been touched by this issue, by the abortion issue, whether you've had one or you've paid for one, you encouraged someone to have one not knowing, whatever it is, remember that every single person here needs the same thing. We all need him. Some people will concede your science, and they'll say, we know it's human, we've known that all along, but it's not a person. It's human, but it's not a person. They're making a distinction between mere human beings and human beings with value. In other words, some human beings matter more than others. Now we're back full circle. The question there for us is, well, what is it that makes human beings valuable? What's the thing that would give a mere human being enough value to be called a valuable person? What is that thing? This is a philosophical question. So we'll go to philosophy to answer it. And it happens that philosophy only really gives us a couple of categories by way of answer. It may be that you are valuable like an instrument. Instruments play for a purpose. They perform in a certain way. So instrumental answers to the question, why are human beings valuable, are going to deal with abilities, attributes, functions, things you can do, what you might look like, that kind of stuff, instrumental. The other type of answer philosophy gives is that you might be intrinsically valuable. Now that one's so simple, most people just dismiss it outright. Intrinsically valuable means you are valuable in light of the kind of thing you are. In other words, you count because you're human. Could it be that simple? Stephen Schwartz says that it's that simple. He says that there is no relevant difference, no difference important enough between the embryo that you once were and the adult that you are today that would make it okay to have killed you back then, but not now. In fact, Stephen Schwartz says there are only 4 areas of difference you can point out between embryos and us. I'm going to name them for you, but I have to go over here to talk about them because they're instrumental differences. He says embryos are smaller, size. He says they're less developed, level of development. He says that they are located in a different place, environment. And he says that they are dependent on their mothers for survival, degree of dependency. Size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency, SLED, SLED. Let's look at these for just a second. Is size the thing that gives you value? We could play a game in this room called Let's All Stand Up, and we'll see how that works out. You guys following me? Some who would say the unborn is tiny, smaller than the dot at the end of a sentence, so they don't count. But if size is the thing that determines your value, that would mean that smaller human beings are less valuable than larger human beings. Ladies, we are generally speaking smaller than the guys. Women's rights is out the window if that's the case. I'm a gymnast, so I have no hope, right? NBA players would rule the world. It's a scary thought. Size, it doesn't work. It creates called a value spectrum, and on that spectrum, some human beings matter more than others. Well, that's not fair. Level of development, the unborn are less developed than we are. That's true. My nephew AJ is less developed than every man in this room in many, many ways. But I can't kill AJ because he's not as developed as us. But if we're going to grant it for the unborn human beings, then we have to be consistent across the human spectrum. See, logic demands consistency. And what we find is we've created a value spectrum on which less developed humans matter less and therefore have less of a right to life. For those of you getting ready to head to university, you'll hear level of development arguments that sound very sophisticated. They'll deal with things like consciousness, a certain degree of brain development, sentience, self-awareness. My first question for anyone who would claim one of those as the value-giving thing would be, why is it that thing and not something else, first of all? Philosophers call that the grounding question. The next question would be, how much of that thing do I have to have before I become valuable? Just wondering. Because it creates that spectrum. Environment is where you're located. The unborn are inside. We're outside, a difference of less than 10 inches. But logically speaking, if it's a shift of 10 inches that can bring you into valuable humanity, we can argue you right out of it with the same shift. And degree of dependency, the unborn are dependent on their mothers for survival. That's true too. But I have a mom who's diabetic. She is dependent upon insulin. And without it, her body will not process sugar in the way that it's supposed to, and she will not survive very long. I cannot kill my mom because of her dependency. But if you're going to grant it for the unborn human beings, you got to be consistent. Instrumental answers create value spectrums. They create societies where some human beings don't matter as much as others. Guys, there is no grounding for human equality when we base our value on something functional. The only answer that makes sense is that you are intrinsically valuable because of the kind of thing you are. You're human, so you count. This just happens to line up with page 1 of the scripture that says you were made in the image of God. He endowed you with his image-bearingness. No one can take that from you. You can't give it away. It is simply yours. That's really good news. Punchinello learned that truth. He learned when he met another woman named Lucia. She didn't have any stickers, and so she got his attention. Because unlike all those Wemmicks who were covered in gold stars, Punchinello was covered in gray dots. That's what the Wemmicks put on him, covered in them. But he watched Lucia, and he noticed the other Wemmicks would look at her, and when she would do something impressive, they would try to put gold stars on her, but the stars would fall off. And then the other Wemmicks would look at her, and they didn't like that she was different, so they would put gray dots on her, and the dots would fall off. And Punchinello wanted to know, why does this happen? Why don't you have any stickers? Lucia said, it's simple. I go see Eli every day. Now, Eli was the woodworker at the top of the hill. So Punchinello finally got curious enough, and he went into Eli's workshop, and he opened those big, heavy doors, and he heard this big, booming voice. It said, hello, Punchinello. I always think about Morgan Freeman's voice, because Morgan Freeman, right? And Punchinello stopped, and he said, you know my name? Eli said, of course I know your name. I made you. And Punchinello said, why doesn't Lucia have any stickers? This is the pressing question on his mind. And Eli sits him up on the table, and he says, Punchinello, Lucia has decided that what I think is more important than what they think. The stickers only stick if they matter to you. And the more you trust in my love, the less the stickers matter. My favorite part of this story is that Punchinello did not fully understand this gospel story and the grace that Eli was explaining to him. Grace is a tricky, tricky thing, you guys. He kind of scratched his head and he thought to himself, I think he really meant it. And as he walked out of Eli's workshop, one dot fell off. Men and women, in a culture like this one, you can learn to simplify the issue by focusing in on that question, what is the unborn, and by trotting out your toddler. You can explain that the science has answered this question, that the unborn are living, distinct, and whole human beings from the moment of conception. And you can tell people that there's no important enough difference between the embryo they once were and the adult they are today. Size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency don't matter enough to say they could have been killed then, but not now. You can defend your unborn neighbors. And you can also know that because of the grace of God, you can be the type of man or woman who doesn't succumb to all the ways that this world will market you to yourself just today and tomorrow and the next day. You can be the type of man or woman who is not defined by this world because someone else has already defined you and he overcame the world. And to the degree that you can walk in that truth like Punchinello began to, you will become very dangerous to a world like this one in the best possible way because the world doesn't know what to do with people it can't define. And you'll look a whole lot like Christ. I hope you guys enjoy the day. I hope you learn great things. Go out there and be dangerous.